Are we allowing people to die at the altar of politics, at the altar of money and profit for big corporations? Are we at the point where we're not willing to listen to physicians, who people who have been experts in their field for decades, because they are questioning the establishment ideology, and because we're not willing to listen to them, we are allowing people to die? The reason that I did this video is because I am very concerned, not just about censorship by big tech companies, about bias in the media. As many of you know, that's my background. I was a TV news reporter for many years. I am very concerned that when it comes to COVID-19, that there are potential options out there for people that we should be discussing that have been not allowed at the table because they question the establishment, because they question the politics and the nature of the debate about this disease. And because of that, we're all suffering because we are not allowed to access information that could potentially be life saving for people out there who need to hear it. This video is not about a cure for COVID 19. This is about a doctor who successfully treated patients with COVID 19, talking about how he was silenced and censored by the federal government. Dr. Brownstein, could you real fast just run people through your background so that they know your education and how long you've been in practice?
So I'm a board certified family doctor. I've been in practice 28 years, and I've been practicing in a suburb of Detroit, West Bloomfield, Michigan. And I started off practicing conventional medicine for 6 months or so, and then realized it wasn't helping my patients. And I searched for a different way to do things. And really, I switched to holistic principles right after that, and have been pretty much doing that for the last 28 years or so. And written numerous books and articles, and I read a newsletter, and see patients in a busy office.
You do holistic treatments, but you are a medical doctor. You have an MD. You went to medical school. You did residency just like every other medical doctor.
I'm a board certified family doctor, and when I use the word holistic, I mean combining conventional and alternative medicine. So, someone has pneumonia, I use antibiotics. Or maybe I'll use a vitamin C IV or something to help them lessen the course of the antibiotics they have to take. And, use probiotics to support their gut while they're on the antibiotic. But I use conventional therapies. My goal is to try and figure out how to help patients, with their health and achieve their health. Something I wasn't really taught in medical school. What I was taught in medical school was how to diagnose disease and how to prescribe the drug to treat that name that you give them.
And that kind of brings us to where you got into a little bit of hot water, I guess, with the FTC, because here you are trying to find a unique, individualized, novel approach to COVID 19 when you had patients that came down with it. And we're going to get into what happened, I guess, a little bit later. But can we first talk about what you did? So you have patients who test positive for this. And this also was like back when we're still we still are trying to understand this virus, but this was, months ago when it was still very new. What did you do? And tell us a little bit about your study, what you did, how these patients reacted to it.
COVID, came to the U.S. first announced really in February, I guess, maybe the end of January in the West Coast, Seattle area, as you know. And I was following it. I was following it from that first report in China when they said we have atypical, couple patients with atypical pneumonia we think is caused by a new virus that humans haven't been exposed to. So I followed it from the beginning. I was blogging about it, writing about it. I've been blogging for 20 years, and I've written 15 books. I read a newsletter, so I like writing and I like putting my thoughts out there. And so COVID was coming. It hits the West Coast first, and then you start to hear reports. It's coming, I think Chicago might have been next or something, and we knew it was coming. So I had a meeting with my staff at the end of February, and everyone's on edge. The headlines were, we don't know what to do. This is going to be the next 19, what was it, 19, I can't remember the year, 19 flu pandemic.
1918.
Flu pandemic, it's here, and, we're going to have 1 to 3 million Americans dead, with the British model that came out. And so I have a staff that's all up in arms, and anxious about it. And so I had a meeting after, or at the end of our week, and I said to them, you know, we've been practicing medicine. I've been practicing medicine for 28 years. I said, in a few months now. So I said, the first 28 years were practiced for this very thing that's coming. And I said, we've been treating influenza and viral illnesses and influenza-like illnesses pretty much the same way for over 25 years. As we learn new things, we might tweak it a little bit, but the formula has been pretty much the same way. And our patients don't develop pneumonia from it. They don't get hospitalized from it anywhere near the numbers that they should. Every year we have 20 to 80,000 Americans dead from influenza-like illnesses, according to the CDC. Our patients don't experience that in anywhere near what the numbers should be. So I said to my staff, I think we've got a good plan for this. I said, I don't know for sure because we never treated this, but I'm sure we've treated other coronavirus infections since they take up 10 to 20% of the influenza-like illnesses that we see every year. And again, our patients do well. So I told the staff that, we're going to stay open through this. Our patients are going to need us. I said, my guess is most doctors' offices are going to close. And I'm working. And I said, I hope you guys will work with me. And if you don't, there's no consequences to it. I said, I'm working until I get sick or they won't let me. And so we started seeing patients and we were scared. We were going out to the parking lot in March in Michigan. Remember, Detroit was a hot spot with New York, Jersey, Detroit, and maybe Massachusetts right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And our hospitals, ERs were overflowing. They were worried that the ICUs were going to overflow and there wouldn't be enough ventilators. And patients were dying left and right. The reports were coming fast and furious. If you get hospitalized and you get put on a ventilator, you're going to die from this thing. So my partners and I were going out to the parking lot. We were in March, which is cold, snowy, sleety, icy weather. And we're in full gear, with face masks and gowns and things. And I remember, in the middle of a snowstorm, shaking off my head like I'm a dog, trying to get the snow to come off my face mask so I can see the veins to put an IV in someone from their car.
Wow.
So when we started doing it, I was scared. My partners were scared because, we didn't know if we were going to get sick. I have asthma. I have severe scoliosis with lung involvement. I have no immunoglobulin A. I'm the worst candidate to get, a new viral illness or any viral illness. And so we started treating our patients, and lo and behold, they responded just as they have the last 28 years. They got better, and they call us up. They can't breathe. They're scared. They're dying. After a couple of treatments, one IV maybe, and they nebulize hydrogen peroxide and iodine, they can breathe again. And that was the routine story we were hearing from our patients: 1 or 2 nebulized treatments and some oral vitamins. And so I was reporting it, and I was blogging about it, and I would do interviews with patients that got better, and these were our sickest patients. Some were hospitalized before they saw us. Some were not our patients and referred to us by other doctors because they started to see my posts on it. And the stories were uniformly the same. They couldn't breathe. They were worried about dying, and their doctors are telling them there's nothing they can do for them. Well, so we started doing the therapies, and it was working. We kept track. I told my partners, you keep track of every patient we treat for this. And especially when I saw it working after the first couple, I said, we're going to write this up and put this out there. So I was putting these interviews out on my webpage, my blog page, and I was the interviewer to the patient. I would just ask them, they told their story. I was just asking them, keeping them on task with their questions, tell me what you did. Tell me, when did you start to feel better? How'd you feel beforehand and all that stuff. And so lo and behold, after about a month of that, and the day before I get a warning letter from the FTC telling me to cease and desist, my partner and I were playing tennis through this whole crisis to get rid of our anxiety and keep us sane. So we were driving home from tennis after treating people, all day and going to the parking lot a few times, doing IVs. I said to him, Rick, I've been practicing 28 years. He's a little bit older than me. And I said, this is the best thing I've ever done in medicine, Rick. What do you think? And he said, I got 10 more years on you. Nothing even comes close to this. This is the best thing we've ever done. And then I said to him, one of our deathbeds, one of us should say to the other one, it was an honor treating COVID with you. And he looked at me and said, absolutely. So the next day I get a letter from the FTC telling me that And they went through all my blog posts on COVID, especially the interviews, and they bullet pointed out things patients said and things I said, and they said I never promised a cure in any of those interviews. I said we were treating our patients who had COVID and they got better, and here's what we did. We were supporting the immune system. Never mentioned a cure for COVID. I said there's no cure for COVID. This is supporting the immune system, which is really the only thing that gets people over COVID is their immune system neutralizes and gets rid of the virus. That's why we've had millions of people get over the illness. So I get a letter from the FTC telling me because there's no preventive treatment or cure for COVID, because there's no human trial showing anything you say that relates to preventive treatment or cure for COVID exists, you can't say that. So you must stop. You have 48 hours to remove it or else. And you're following in violation of federal code, and they list the federal code.
Has that ever happened to you before? Just curious, like with every other treatment you've done, anything like that before?
No, nothing. So I was shocked. I get home from work. I didn't, I was tired but feeling good. We had a good day. My wife's looking over the computers. I walk in the door. I'm like, what's that look on your face? And she says, you got a letter from the FTC. Holding my bags, I got my coat on, and I said, what does that mean? She said, well, I think we have to close the website down, close your blogs down. You can't do any more of those interviews and can't write about COVID anymore. My first comment to her was, maybe it's time to retire. And she said, you're not retiring over this letter. This letter is wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You were treating your patients as you saw fit. They were getting better. You were reporting it like what you should be doing. And you want to retire because you're tired of practicing medicine. Let's talk about that. But you're not retiring over this letter. We'll get through this. So that was helpful.
Yeah, it's supportive.
we shut the website. We took all the stuff down for COVID. And I titled all those interviews, There's Still Hope Out There. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it was up in the 20s. There's still hope out there because there was no hope. When I was doing that stuff, there was nothing. Doctors had nothing to offer them. If they got in the hospital and got on a vent, there were 88% chance they were going to die.
Well, even now, there's still not a consensus on hope. I would say even months later, people are still kind of, flailing around in the dark.
So I was taught in medical school to report your findings, report your successes, report your failures, report what works, report what doesn't work, so other doctors can learn from your experience. That's what I did. And then I get that letter. So I was cataloged. When I got the letter, I was in the midst of, I was going to write a study up because our patients were doing well. And, at that point I got the letter, I just stopped. And I stopped for about 2 weeks, and I tried to, gather my senses, get anxiety under control, and figure out what am I going to do here. I'm the first in my family to get a federal agency after that.
Right. And I'm curious, Dr. Bronstein, like when you're thinking through all of this, is your mind going to, could I end up in jail? I mean, where does your mind take you to worst case scenario if you continue down the road of treating people or talking about it with this letter?
You should talk to my wife because I asked her a bunch of times, am I going to jail for this? And she's a lawyer, and so yeah, my mind went there. Of course, I looked up the law, and there's big penalties and potential jail, and they can take all your assets. They can, it's a federal government.
Right.
They can do a lot to you. So after about 2 weeks of moping and, letting anxiety get me, I decided I didn't do anything wrong. I'm treating my patients as I see fit. That's what I was trained to do. And, I wrote up a study, and we have 107 patients in the study. We had one hospitalization, 107 patients, and no ventilators, no deaths. They recovered much quicker than the numbers that are out there, and I reported that. And our study consisted of using some oral vitamins, vitamin A, C, D, and iodine, nebulized hydrogen peroxide and iodine. And then if they were sicker, they got IVs of hydrogen peroxide, vitamin C, and shots of ozone. And therapy cost $200. I wrote it up, got a peer review.
Yep. I actually have it on the screen right now, so people, and I'll link it in the description of the video, so if people want to look it up for themselves, they can. I highlighted one part in your abstract. A novel treatment program combining nutritional and oxidative therapies was shown to successfully treat the signs and symptoms of 100% of 107 patients diagnosed with COVID-19. So, here you are, you have something that seems to have been pretty successful, and like nobody wants to hear about it, or lots of people want to hear about it, but the federal government's concerned about you. I mean, to you, like, as you're thinking through this and you say, hey, 100% of my patients responded positively, but I'm not allowed to talk about it, that's got to be pretty frustrating for you.
So I published a study, and anxiety comes back to me right away because I figured, great, now the government's going to marshal its resources against me, a family doctor. That lasted a couple days. I let it go. So we sent a letter to the FTC, the same gentleman who signed the warning letter, and we said, you said in your letter, because there's no human clinical trials showing what you say works, there's no preventive treatment or cure for COVID-19, therefore you need to remove it. So we sent a letter, we quoted that out of the letter and said, well, we now have a human clinical trial. Here's the trial, we attached it. We'd like to post it to our website without comment. And we get a letter back within 24 hours saying, no, it's not a randomized controlled trial, therefore you can't do it. Now, in my study, I say the reason we didn't do a randomized trial was because ethically and morally, if I withhold a treatment from a patient that's sick that I think is going to help them, how the hell am I going to sleep at night?
Right.
Well, I can't do that to my patients, and I wasn't going to do that. COVID was a new treatment. We didn't know what was going to work or wasn't going to work. I'm not going to withhold anything that I think might help them, just as any doctor wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And look, the doctors in the hospital were trying their best as well, too, doing their therapies, when the patients were dying. I'm not criticizing doctors here, but I'm not doing a randomized trial and not treating patients with things that I don't think works. That's not who I am. So that's where we are right now with the FTC, and I'm still silent on it. And but the positive out of this is I'm writing a book called A Holistic Approach to Viruses, because I found out books have First Amendment protection, even though I don't.
Yeah, it definitely is a chilling effect, I think, on the medical profession, and unfortunately is not, I don't think, getting enough attention in mainstream media, this sort of battle behind the scenes of medical professionals who are trying to get the word out about what's worked, or even just questioning certain policies, and like for their entire careers have been looked at as experts in their field until now. And now it's like all of a sudden, if you question the establishment narrative, you are thrown to the wayside, almost like this is like Salem witch trials 2020. I've never seen it in my lifetime, but granted, I'm 38 and I don't really remember like SARS and MERS back 15 years ago. So I'm curious for you, is this the first time in your practice that you feel like people like yourself, we've seen other doctors the same things happen to, or kind of blowing the whistle on, say, for instance, ventilator protocol or other treatments, who are like looked at as if they're leading people to their death, that they're just completely, they're driving drunk, or they're, going 100 miles over the speed limit, like these people are just reckless, when in fact they actually have something to share. Have you seen anything like this in your practicing career?
No, there's nothing like this. This is unique. I went through the FTC list of how many warning letters they sent. I think it's over 300 now. I knew some of the doctors sent warning letters. They were my friends. I called them. They were shocked. I was totally shocked when I got the warning letter. Now, I've had other doctors tell me, I wasn't shocked. You were out there saying all this stuff. I knew they were gonna bring you in or come after you. I'm like, come after me for what? Because I'm reporting what I'm doing in my practice and patients are getting better. I was shocked. I never thought that would happen. I've read this, I've read about other doctors getting treated like this, but I guess it doesn't resonate with you until that 2x4 hits you in the forehead, and then you're dazed and confused and trying to figure out what the heck just happened. But this COVID-19 is a new beast, and I don't understand why it's happened. I don't understand where the journalists are. I don't understand why they can't ask questions, why they can't, get off the narrative. You watch, and it doesn't matter. You can watch CNN, you can watch Fox, you can watch, from the left and from the right. These are totally opposite networks. They basically say the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a little difference in both networks, but was it the fourth estate? Is that what the journals are
right
to keep us in track and keep checking things? They've left us high and dry with this.
Yeah.
Now we've got a basically the narrative has been for COVID: wear a mask, social distance, quarantine at home when we tell you to, and wait for the vaccine.
Right.
And we spent over $9 billion on a vaccine. I mean, it's coming. I hope it's safe and I hope it's effective. while we've got over 100,000 right now, maybe there's some other therapies out there that could help people, and maybe we should investigate them. Maybe we should debate it. Maybe we should talk about it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's exactly the point here, and that's really the point of this video. I hope people understand that, one way or the other, I'm not necessarily trying to push a particular medical treatment. I'm trying to give the voice to somebody who's found something that's worked, and saying, like, if we are really honest about how new the virus is, and that's what you constantly hear, and you will hear that in mainstream media. It's a new virus, we don't know, we have to be very careful, that's why we have to shut down the economy. That's what they'll tell you. You got we have to have millions of people out of work because we just don't know. Well, if we really don't know, then shouldn't we be allowing lots of variety of voices at the table? It just doesn't seem to make sense to me that we have monolithic voice, in mainstream media or anywhere else in the medical profession, when we're also admitting that we don't know anything about the virus. Those things seem to be sort of at odds with each other.
When I get asked, and I've done a few interviews, when I get asked about it, I would say, talk to the patients. They'll tell you. They would tell you they were interviewing like I'm doing with you. I was the interviewee at that point, and trying to give people hope out there that there were things to do, and there is hope out there. You just can't hear it through the noise. And the whole hydroxychloroquine mess is, it epitomizes this too. Now, I didn't use hydroxychloroquine as part of my study, so what do I say about hydroxychloroquine? My answer is, I don't know. I didn't use it for my study. I've used it for 25 years for other things. It's very safe when it's used appropriately. Do I think we should be firing ER doctors who talk about her success with hydroxychloroquine? No, I think we should talk to her about it and hear it out. And, then we can debate it.
Yeah.
And what's happened to our country?
I find it very odd, and I've seen other journalists, thankfully, agree with this, so I know I'm not totally crazy. I find it very odd to see journalists calling for censorship. I think we're at a place in history where there's probably a lot of fear, I guess, because of the access that now the public has to information, whereas before, like, mainstream media was the beginning and end of your options for where you were going to get your information, and now you have YouTube, like where we're on right now, or other social media platforms. But now you have this collusion between media, big tech companies, sometimes the government, and they're kind of, at the rate at which people are able to access information, they're trying to suppress what they believe is outside the circle of acceptable ideology. And I will say that, like, I did another video on my channel, which just goes to show the hypocrisy. One of my videos was on the economic protest that people were engaging in across the country regarding the shutdowns due to COVID-19, saying, hey, we should open back up. That was demonetized on my channel as harmful behavior, those protests. Even though I never heard of anybody getting shot and killed at those protests, they had never shut down, entire blocks for emergency medical crews to get through. And then a few weeks later, I do a video on the Chaz Chop in Seattle, because we're from the Pacific Northwest. I drove into Seattle to see it for myself, and that protest was totally fine. That was not, YouTube did not find that to be harmful content whatsoever, even though there were several people who were shot and killed. They had cut off the entire, blocks of the city. So it's like, even you see in YouTube, one thing that they determined to be harmful behavior is it's a protest. It's people to get, same kind of deal. This one, in Chaz Chop, they were all living in the same space, not just there for an hour or so. And that wasn't harmful. And so that's why people start to get very skeptical. And I think it's unfortunate, because I think even the media is trying to, like, suppress the skepticism instead of just admitting that, like, hey, hang on a second, there's probably reason for people to be concerned that they're not getting the full story here. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because here you are, like, this guy who's trained just like every other medical doctor. You've tried other treatments that have worked. You're going down a path that's helpful. And hey, if what we want is for people to get better and to survive this, why wouldn't we want to talk to you? And that's, to me, that's where this all ends up. And that's the greatest concern for me, is that are people needlessly dying because folks like yourself are not getting the chance to speak up? And I think that's the responsibility that you were talking about, sleeping at night. I think there are people out there that should really be wondering if they should be sleeping at night because they have been disallowing people like yourself to the table.
It's terrible. And you missed a big factor in your start of this analysis. You said government the media. There was a third thing you said.
Big tech.
Big tech. Well, big tech, you shouldn't mention big pharma, because big pharma is controlling our legislature. It's controlling the airways. They're more advertising and all the news shows and all the shows on TV anyways. And, they want nothing more than to have billions of people on the planet have to get this vaccine that's going to come forward. Like I said, I hope the vaccine is safe and effective. But until we have a vaccine that's safe and effective, what are we going to do? We're just going to watch people die, or just lock us in our homes and tell us to wear masks and social distance, which we haven't done so well with that, up to now. So I think it's a sad place we're in. I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in the whole country. I'm disappointed in our leadership from the top to the bottom, and everyone seems to have left us at the altar. That's what I think. That's just I don't know what's happened to our country and where we're going to go from here, but unless we make a statement that we've had enough. And you're right about the skepticism. That's why people are looking elsewhere. That's why 40% are going to follow President Trump off a cliff no matter what he says, because they're irritated. Everyone's irritated, and perhaps rightfully so, because how do you trust the information that's coming out there? That's what I've been blogging about. That I went to medical school. I was as straight as an arrow. I never took a vitamin in my life before I became a holistic doctor. I didn't grow up in a holistic household. We went to the doctor. We listened to the doctor. We didn't question the doctor. We took what the doctor prescribed us, and that's how I grew up. That's what I wanted to do in medicine. And then I realized 6 months into it, these drugs aren't working like I was taught in med school. People aren't getting better on them. There's got to be a better way out there. And, these drugs are actually causing problems. I'm actually using more drugs to prescribe for those drugs. So how do I support people? How do I build up their health? How do I make them healthier? That's what led me to holistic medicine. And that's what I've been writing about in my newsletter, my books, my blog posts. And, until this thing. And then you get a letter from a federal agency, warning you, remove it or else.
Real fast, I wanted to take your attention to the editorial that talks about your study, and this is in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law, and I'll have a link again to that if people want to read it. But they make a good point. This is a quote. For far too long, evidence-based medicine has undervalued and sidelined real-world clinical evidence, which is rich in detail that can and should inform decisions at the individual doctor-patient level. And that's essentially like what you are offering, I guess, to the discussion about how to deal with COVID. Why, I guess, do you think, and I don't know, maybe there's not an easy answer to this, but why do you think that in an era and with a virus where all we really have right now is this exact like real world clinical experience, right? It's like it takes a long time to do, years worth of following people and research and all that stuff. And so this is what we need to go with right now, right? I mean, you would think that that's what we have. Why do you think people are so resistant to it? Why is the medical community so resistant to it? Why is the media so resistant to it?
As far as the medical community has never been easy to change. There were stories, go back to Semmelweis from the 1800s, where he was a doctor who worked at a public and a private hospital in Europe, and in the public hospital, women at childbirth were dying, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think 8-fold more than women in the private hospital. So we did a study, and so at the public hospital, the doctors were doing autopsies and delivering babies. At the private hospital, they weren't doing autopsies. So he felt that doctors were transferring something from the dead bodies to the women delivering babies, which made them sick and they died at huge rates. So he put a bucket of water between the beds, and he had doctors dunk their hands in the water for, I believe, 60 seconds, and then deliver the babies. So they washed their hands before they delivered the babies. The maternal sepsis rate went down to the other hospital, to the private hospital. So he wrote an article and said doctors should wash their hands before delivering babies. For that heresy, he was thrown out of the medical society. He couldn't practice medicine anymore. They put him in an insane asylum, and he died a broken man. So it took doctors 30 to 40 years to wash their hands before delivering babies and surgeries. And during that time, they said it was all nonsense. So medicine has never been easy to change, but that's why we have debate in medicine, and you publish studies and you publish your findings, and you can talk about it. Now, that's slow to go, but that's how it goes in medicine. With this thing, this is different though. This is, you're like you said, in trying to publish things, it's not so easy. And the hydroxychloroquine is a perfect example of that. And I don't understand why we can't debate it. I don't understand that, Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, which is a conventional conservative organization, publishes a study that's 50% less death with hydroxychloroquine when they used it. So they just applied to the FDA for use of hydroxychloroquine in COVID, and the FDA said no. I don't understand where this is coming from. I mean, this is just unprecedented, and it should stop. And it's, unless we, the people, stay, we've had enough and make our voices heard, it's going to keep going. It's going to steamroll us.
Right. Yeah. And how does that happen? I mean, it just, again, like I said earlier in our chat, I've seen journalists for the first time, or I guess not the first time, but I've never seen it to this degree, calling for lockdown on information, where it's like, wait a second, I thought we were like the bearers of the First Amendment, that we were supposed to be calling for there to be, even at the risk that something bad is said. Like, to me, like, the risk of the good stuff being withheld is worse. Like, I would rather take the risk that every once in a while somebody says something that then, okay, eventually arguments come to the table to decide, hey, it's invalid. I'd rather take that risk than the risk that good stuff never makes it to the table. And not just journalists, but scientists I've talked to, like I've seen as I've posted about free speech on my other social media channels, having scientists say, you yourself as a journalist are doing harm to the people who come to your channel, who follow you, because you're just letting them read anything. Like, you're just letting them see any. And here I am, like, well, first off, shouldn't people get to make decisions for themselves in the United States of America? Like, shouldn't we allow for people to not necessarily need us as the babysitter? And then secondly, how can a scientist or a journalist or somebody in a field that, like, you brought up that study, which I read about because I just had a baby a few months ago, and I remember reading that exact case. How do people in a field that should know the consequences of calling for punishment, censorship of new ideas, because there is a long precedent of that as a very real danger? Why in this case would they say, no, this time we really need to have a lockdown? This time we really need to go after doctors. This time we need to go after scientists. Like, didn't we learn from these previous cases, like the one you just brought up, that oftentimes the new ideas are looked at skeptically and then, punished? And so in 2020, we shouldn't be calling for witch trials of people who are bringing forth new information about a virus that, frankly, we don't know anything about. It's just, to me, it's bewildering. I do kind of wonder if everything post-Trump has kind of become this way, that we're seeing a politicization of weird things that before had never been politicized, simply because of the climate we're in. I don't know. I don't have a good answer, but to me, the ultimate danger is that if you should be able to seek a treatment that you want as an adult in the United States of America, and if you've got something that works for people, you should be able to tell people about it so they can seek it if they want it.
I would agree with you. And look, I didn't start off my medical career thinking I was going to go in a different direction than what I was taught. I thought I was going to move along that direction. Well, things changed, and things change in medicine every day, and things should change in medicine every day. Otherwise, we'd be sitting there bloodletting everybody for every condition and hoping that it worked. As far as my colleagues go, I think that, I heard from a lot of doctors around the country, especially in New York and New Jersey, who were working in those hospitals when people were dying. They were devastated. They wanted different therapies. They knew what they were doing wasn't working. They didn't know what to do. So I think that it's a problem we've got right now, and I'm worried for the future of our country. I'm worried for my kids who are both in medical school. One graduated and one's in medical school. I'm worried about them just being younger age, and what's this country going to do? And when you say, how did this happen? It happened because they feared us enough that we were willing to do anything. We were willing to stay in our houses for 3 months. whether it worked or not, it could be another debate. But they made the fear so high that if you were going to get this disease, you were going to die, and there was no therapy offered until we can come up with a vaccine. So therefore, you need to do exactly what we tell you. That's been the message since the beginning of this illness, and that hasn't changed much. Well, there's other doctors talking about hydroxychloroquine, vitamin A, iodine. It's, my study was that stuff, and ozone and hydrogen peroxide. So how do we change things? Well, I think that number one, we need to try and hold these politicians accountable and just to ask them questions and not just be such sheep to everything and just, let it happen. How do we do that? I don't, I'm not a politician. I'm busy in my day job, seeing patients and writing at night. But if we don't make some changes, I don't know. I don't know where we go.
It worries me that journalists nowadays ask questions of our leaders for an answer that would be good on Twitter or Facebook and not, questions or answers that the public really needs to hear. That we're kind of driven now by an emotional, bombshell tweet culture. And so if it's science that's boring because it doesn't have this emotional edge to it, because it's actual real science that's helping people, it's not, driving people to their deaths or creating some kind of political bombshell, then we just don't want to talk about it. And I think it's an unfortunate reflection on an industry that, in my opinion, deservedly has its share of skepticism. I started this YouTube channel because I really care about journalism, not because I hate it, but because I was somebody who really got into the field because I believed in it, not just as a career, but really as a calling. And I don't think that my old industry is going to ever regain trust until it starts taking responsibility for its failures. And unfortunately, a lot of my peers are going the other route and just becoming extra defensive about how could the public possibly think that about us. We're just these hardworking people who are martyring ourselves every day. And I have to question in a lot of cases whether that's in fact the case. And that I hope that we regain the trust, but it won't be by defending ourselves as if we are free from blame.
What you say is true. And, look, as part of the public, when I watch those press conferences with President Trump, look, I'm an equal opportunity party, not hater, but just criticizer. I couldn't consider myself either part of either party because they both have a mess going on and have their problems, and I can criticize them both better than anybody out there. But when I see the press ask those questions to President Trump, who trust me, I wish he would stop tweeting and saying his politicizing things as well. But I'm like, they're asking these questions. There's not a question there. It's their personal opinion. It's their emotions that's driving them, and they're just trying to get a rise out of him. And they're all in the mud pit right now, sort of slinging mud at each other. And it's that's why we're all frustrated. That's why we're all cynical. That's why we're all irritated and pissed off about things. And we want a different way. And I don't know where it's going to come from, but we need that fourth estate sort of putting things in check, and that's lost right now.
Where's the hope then? You keep writing about it. I think we could end on that. Where's the hope? And we'll end there.
At least for medicine, there's hope out there. And as you said, for your calling into journalism, my calling was into medicine. I wouldn't change a thing. My kids were all upset about this FTC letter, and here they're going into it. And I said to them, guys, whatever happens with this, even with this letter, whatever happens, I wouldn't change a thing. Medicine is a calling, and it's a good profession, and it's an honorable profession, and treating patients is a gift beyond giving. It's a great way to earn a living, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. I do think that we can change things. I think that everyone first off, everyone could talk to each other a little bit nicer. And that's one thing. Everyone doesn't have to jump down everyone's throat when they see something they don't like, and they could keep their tone down and respectfully disagree with each other without raising their voices and getting personal in their attacks.
And perhaps be able to admit what they don't know. I think that's another thing too. It's you see all these people on Facebook or social media that really are not experts in the field but act like they are. So I think we all could just take a step back too and have a little bit of humility about what we don't know.
Of course. And just tone the rhetoric down. So when you're speaking to somebody, as well as I know, when someone asks you a question with a tone in their voice or with an ear, and they're ready to grab you by the neck, you're going to react to that. And so when I see those reporters to do that to President Trump, who, look, he gives it right back to him, and he does the same thing to them. So I think that's part of the problem as well. That it doesn't set a good example for the rest of us, and it just agitates agitates us as a country. So I think number one, we could start communicating better, and number two, we can start saying we're not going to put up with stuff anymore. We're not going to put up with things being silenced. It should be silenced. We do have a constitution. It should be there for us. Just because some bureaucrat writes me a letter doesn't mean it's right. And unfortunately, that's what I have to deal with right now. But that's where we are in this world. And I think you need to keep putting your interviews out there, and we need voices of the wilderness speaking. And that's the good thing about the internet. I mean, there's good and bad with the internet, but the good thing is people can gather more information. The public's not stupid. The media may treat us as if we're stupid, and they're going to tell us what's right and what's wrong. But many times we can start to read through it when we get enough information. The problem is getting enough information, but that's where we are today.
Well, tell everybody how they can get more information on you and what you're doing. I'll have links in the description, but where's the best way to follow you?
So if you want, right now I've shut my blog site down, although we've been investigating how I can start writing again. And so my website is drbrownstein.com, Dr. Brownstein, just as it sounds, DRBROWNSTEIN.com. And I have 15 books out there. I've written books to, basically try and tell people there is hope out there. There are natural things you can do to support the body. And what works in my practice and what doesn't work. I write a newsletter, a national newsletter. I'm doing interviews now. I've got my anxiety under control over this thing, and I will be back writing. Once I can figure out how not to get any more letters or problems from federal agencies.
Again, like you said, it's not like you're necessarily like saying you're the god of COVID-19 and everybody should listen to you. It's just like we should have a conversation. That's what this should all be about. And you know what? Honestly, Dr. Brownstein, it's not just your field and COVID-19. There's a lot of topical conversations right now where there are just certain things that people aren't allowed to say, which could be valid points, but we have seen kind of a lockdown because of, like, you've heard the term cancel culture. And so it'll be interesting to see where this goes, like where this leads us, because I think it could go a couple of directions. But for the people who are starting to get more and more frustrated, I wonder how that bubbles up. That actually concerns me too. It's like, what are the consequences of keeping people more and more at bay from information that could be helpful, and then growing and sort of giving fuel to like legitimate, you have these conspiracy theories out there where people are just like all kinds of, does it just make people so paranoid and so skeptical that, like you said, they'll follow somebody off a cliff because they don't want to listen anymore to what would be conventional because it just totally failed them. I don't know. We'll see, but I do appreciate your taking the time to do this, and definitely I'll be paying attention to what happens with your FTC battle, and if I can find you a constitutional attorney, I will send him your way.
Finish by saying I never said I had a cure for COVID. Never said any of that. I said we're treating the immune system, supporting the immune system so it can treat coronavirus like it treats all the other viruses and bacteria we're exposed to, neutralize it, and help the body get rid of it. And I'll finish with, since when did supporting the immune system become against the law? That's how I feel right now.
Well, and exactly because I actually just saw these articles, like one in CNN, for instance, quoting Dr. Fauci saying that obesity, hypertension are all like risk factors for COVID-19. Diabetes, the CDC says all of this stuff. So if you have these mainstream figures that are regularly being quoted saying that your underlying immune system and your other diseases, these risk factors, like, yeah, okay, so it would make sense, just like with new cancer treatments that we're finding, that when you have individualized approaches and you're helping the immune system, that your body can fight back. Like, what's so crazy? It does seem...
What I've been writing about for 20 years,
right.
That Americans finish last in nearly every health indicator according to the World Health Organization. We're last or next to last. Every single one of them. COVID is a perfect example of what's wrong with our country. We're unhealthy. 2/3 of us are overweight or obese, and we got hit much harder than other countries because we're so unhealthy. This is exactly what's wrong, and there's no mention from the powers that be and Dr. Fauci. How do we get our health back? They're just mentioning put on a mask and social distance, wait for the vaccine. I don't think that's the way to do it right now when tens of thousands, over 100,000 of us have died. It's when the postmortem of this is written medically, this is going to be one ugly autopsy that comes through. Let me tell you.
I agree, and I will leave people with this. If the goal is that people survive, then we should be listening to voices like yours. If the goal is politics, money, all these other things, then you know what? I hate to say it, but it seems like we're going in that direction. If that's what this is about. It certainly doesn't seem like it's about opening up the table to potential cures or even just treatments that would give, like in your case, robust immune response to it. Like if what we're after is that more people survive so that we can reopen the economy in a way that helps people get their jobs back, then what the way we're going at this, to me as just a thinking person in the United States, does not make any sense.
I agree.
All right, Dr. Brownstein, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Again, I'm Allison Morrow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications when I upload new videos, and share this video with people you think might be interested, because I'm sure it's going to get censored by YouTube. If they don't rip it down altogether, it will definitely get demonetized, and it certainly helps when viewers like yourself share these ideas with people you think would get something from it. And I think a lot of us have a lot to learn from Dr. Brownstein's story, simply because if what we really want are answers here and we really want to save lives, then we should be allowing different voices at the table. Again, I'm really concerned about censorship in our country right now and where it's leading us, and the divisiveness among people who are unwilling to acknowledge that there are certain things we don't know, and questions we should be asking, and voices we should be listening to because of politics or money or corporate interest or whatever else. So, at that, I will leave you to ponder these big questions, and I will see you next time.